Very warm welcome from my side. Productive urban landscapes, or how we can turn utopia into reality. First of all, I would like to take you on a little journey and ask you to close your eyes. Imagine it's the year 1458 and you are in a medieval town somewhere in Europe. A hustle and bustle of people, dense houses and various uses that complement each other. You stroll through the alleys, watching carpenters erecting the roof trusses of a half-timbered house. The material for the building comes from the neighboring building, which is no longer in use. And different craftsmen and citizens work together. After a while, you reach the busy marketplace, where farmers loudly sell their seasonal food, while on the other side of the square, theaters played. We lived with and from nature, a balance between efficiency and cycle, and we were all part of a strong and reliable social network. So now, with a personal image in mind, those who had closed your eyes, you can open it again. Thank you. I just have to ask the technicians there behind, I would like to see my notes, please, because I don't want to miss any important information. Can you change the screen, please? Okay, as long as they are busy, we can continue. So what I brought with, the city of the future, the productive city, is not an utopia. It's the city in which we already live. What you can see here is a painting which was painted in 1338. And it doesn't show an existing building. At that time, it was an utopia. It was the ideal image of the people, how they would like to create their city. And the cities were built densely because it was necessary to be economical with resources like building materials, road development, and infrastructure. And likewise, villages and farms, which reproduced the compactness of the city on a small scale, were built and designed in a similar way. So, sorry to interrupt again, but is it possible? Otherwise, give me a second. We always have to improvise. School version, but it also works. So what you can see, I told you this is an utopia, but diversity, mixture, proximity, and dialogue, also complexity and lightness, took place in every old European town, and even in the most confined space. So, however, we don't want to go back to this romantic image of the Middle Ages. But why do I show you this? Because we really appreciate its qualities as a place to produce, to meet and to exchange, to shop and to enjoy. And cities have always been places where housing, production, commerce, trade, services took place, coexisted, and also created synergies. But what else was characteristic for a medieval town? And maybe it was already part of the image you created. A city wall, but not only for defense, but also as a spatial and functional separation of the city and the countryside. Gardens at that time were a luxury that only a few people could afford. Nature remained outside. But of course, the fields and forests were economically closely linked to the city and provided the vital economic basis. But however, physically, they were separated. And this separation often still exists today, even without a wall. And often it is also linked to a psychological separation regarding our understanding and our prejudices we have of what it means to live in the city or in the countryside. And the latter is often less appreciated. But what about the spaces in between, the space between the city and the countryside? We call it third places. So what kind of function could they assume? Maybe a kind of chameleon, versatile in use, and maybe they can build a bridge between the countryside and the city. In many places on this earth, cities still grow uncontrolled like an ulcer, as you can see here on the left. And monofunctional housing estates mushroom at the gates of the cities, and actually more people live in these suburban areas than in the city itself. But this dispersed urban form has become very unsustainable. On the other side, we have the countryside, but nature, how it was used to be, was eaten up. And agriculture in the classical sense only takes place in the countryside. There's hardly any connection to urban areas. But probably the most important resource we have is the landscape, a place for our food production, of course, raw material supplier, and also recreation area. In Germany, 2 square meters of land is still sealed every second, and 25% of it for buildings. The rest is infrastructure. At the same time, our future food demand could increase by 35 to 56% by 2050. So is this still widespread spatial and psychological separation, as you can see? Is this still contemporary? And does it meet our increasing and more complex needs? We think we do not have just to build less, we have to actually avoid sealing new land. And the real ecological challenge is not to continue expanding cities, but to contain urbanization. Maybe you ask yourself now, what is this? What does she want to tell us with this image? Well, but for a long time, the primacy of the city was to break its urban boundaries and expand into the surrounding countryside. But now the landscape is reclaiming the city and intermingling it with natural spaces. So when we rebuild the city today, we shouldn't have the worn-out image of a functionally separated city in mind, but more a hybrid of built, open and natural spaces. So cities and regions must foster productive landscapes at their edges, which are sustainably cultivated with nature and built up through conscious action. And with this concept of the productive landscapes, the space can also become a network for new relationships and a new productivity, to create places for a sharing society and a new togetherness. So the landscape is actually acting as a mediator that structures public spaces and brings people also closer to nature. The new productive city, as we see it, is actually thought of like a factory. Imagine a city as a factory where different uses on a small space come together and complement each other, where logistics and traffic flows are highly efficient, and where we have alternative forms of housing which focus more on commonality and sharing. And for many areas in Europe, this could be really an opportunity to reinvent themselves. And what are currently purely industrialized or residential areas, they could be transformed into a mixed-use, vibrant new neighborhood. A good middle ground for it, what you can see here on the left side of the picture, are 4 to 8 story residential and commercial buildings, because their moderate height is good for urban spaces and the environment, and especially when these buildings form a block. But of course, there is no specific type of a productive city that can be used like a pattern everywhere. But the different forms vary and depend on culture, climate, and location. But the implementation of a functional, social, environmental, and economic density is clearly beyond question. So in our current International Building Exhibition, which will take place in 2027 in the region of Stuttgart in Germany, we are dealing with the question, how do we want to live and work in the future? And therefore, we are looking for innovative, non-mainstream building projects, which we develop together with the project owners. So an IBA is much more than just an architectural exhibition. It's a 10-year format, and it's a diverse, large-scale project and a laboratory for urban and regional development. And IBA changes the buildings and the structural fabric of whole cities and regions. And we are looking for daring and radically new answers to social, economic, and ecological questions in the building sector. So our aim is actually to connect the potential, which we find everywhere, in communities, in companies, in science and politics, to reconceptualize and try out the future of our cities and regions. Well, next one. So we have currently 23 projects in our IBA, and the first one I would like to show you is agriculture meets manufacturing in the city of Fellbach. It's an innovative model for numerous other commercial sites. And two completely different industries, what you can see here, agricultural land on the one hand and a commercial site on the other, are of course spatially separated, but they do actually belong together. And what industrial sites, greenhouses, and agricultural land have in common, they all require a lot of space, and therefore they are mostly located on the outskirts of towns. And here we are talking about 110 hectares we would like to transform. This is the project's Utopia. In a dialogue-oriented planning process, the city administration developed a vision for the future of the area together with businesses, farmers, and private property owners. The commercial and the agricultural spaces will be developed into a mixed-use area, and especially food production will be combined with goods manufacturing, working, and housing. And the municipal authorities, stakeholders, experts, and IBA they are examining possibilities. How can we re-densify existing structures, and how can we create new space by avoiding sealing of new land? And they are also looking into potential synergies by combining commercial and agricultural uses, especially in terms of material cycles and energy distribution. And the result is a concept for an innovative, livable and productive urban neighborhood that acts as a local supplier for local consumption. This is the current status. So we need European test sites like this one to face the problem of the impending climate crisis, the displacement of small farms, but also, of course, to look for possible solutions in an interdisciplinary exchange. And we do a lot of international urban planning competitions, and of course, to set specific criteria and goals. And here in this winning design, you can see some of the points I mentioned before, the combination of re-densification, of mixed use, of closing of material and energy cycles. And and also here the project team is looking into specific synergies by mixing agricultural and commercial use. And it could be a pioneering experimental site also for many other areas with similar issues. The second project is similar. It's located in Winnenden, and it's about 5 hectares in size. And first, the municipality wanted to develop a classic industrial site on agricultural land. But now that we as IBA are involved, the heart of the project completely changed. And here you can see the winning design, also of the international planning competition. And this neighborhood will become a new area that demonstrates the benefits of living and working in a high-densified area with hybrid buildings. And you can see that the large-scale commercial buildings are located to the north and the residential area to the south. And the space which will be needed also, of course, by local companies will be combined with alternative forms of housing and traffic-calmed public spaces. We are also looking for adapted architectural forms that can protect against noise from traffic and industries. And community facilities like cafes or restaurants, they will be designed as shared spaces and will be used by, of course, by the residents and the employees. And also here, there's an ambitious sustainability concept behind it that closes circular systems and allows local food production in forms of vertical farming and rooftop farms. So important is here that the objective is not just to create a new productive neighborhood, but to show also how intelligent and courageous planning can create added value to the environment, the people, and the economy. So what is especially agriculture about within the new productive city? So what do we grow and for what? By working together, especially across sectors, and being bold, we have to create a circular agriculture system that works not only for us, but of course also for our future generations. And why? To appreciate the countryside and use the land in a more efficient and respectful way, and to support our souls and mental health by offering green public spaces. And we have to identify new business models and corporations for urban and rural farming. And we have to produce raw materials for bio-based building materials, for example. And we have to make our cities greener and to create a better impact on the microclimate. And last but not least, to produce local and organic food on different layers within the city. And the so-called third agricultural revolution can mark the use of architecture and technology to facilitate controlled agriculture and to overcome shortages we might have in available land and to reduce the distance between food production and consumption. So what about us? Each of us has a voice so that we are able to speak and to be heard. And it's good to have technologies, innovations, concepts, and designs. But in the end of the day, it's about us because we take decisions, we make decisions, and we take responsibility. And we can change things to the better. So what does the new togetherness of the productive city mean? And how do we as IBA implement it in our projects? So the new productive city mean, like I said, the different uses that will be mixed again, and also that the boundaries between the countryside and the city are blurring. But it also means that we are changing, because new forms we have of working and living enable a completely new interaction between rural and urban areas. So how do we as a society take joint responsibility for our actions? We think it takes local new participative formats and especially local communities that are engaged and that collaborate with a variety of different disciplines and take their successes to the world. It takes not only decision makers, but also doers and especially local caretakers who pull the strings. And now I would like to ask you a question. And in case the answer is yes, so please raise your hand. Do you know what your superpower is? Great, I can see a few hands. Thank you. So have you ever thought about it? How can you actively contribute your talents to this life-changing global community project we are all part of and which could lead to vibrant, productive new urban landscapes? How can we work together enthusiastically? And how can we combine our superpowers and use it in a meaningful way to, well, of course, not just to achieve great things, but also to look at local needs, to build local community task forces, and to create future-proof neighborhoods. So my successes and setbacks have shown me my superpower. Be aware of yours and use it to make great things happen. Realize projects, overcome challenges, and bring people together. Because, I mean, you know, we all have certain talents and we all are rock stars in a way. But we can only make music if we play together to create productive urban landscapes and to turn Utopia